My ex-husband's voice carried across the entire pediatric ward waiting room when he saw me. "Leaving you was the smartest thing I ever did," he said, loud enough that the receptionist looked up from her desk. "A woman who can't carry a child isn't a wife. She's a placeholder." He had his hand resting on the shoulder of the woman beside him, the same woman who used to sit across from me at brunch every Sunday for 6 years, who knew my coffee order, who held my hand in the fertility clinic parking lot the day I got my third negative result. I set my cup of chamomile tea down on the side table, slow and deliberate, and looked up at him with nothing on my face but mild curiosity. "Is that right?" I said. That was when the man walked in through the automatic doors behind him, dressed in a charcoal suit, scanning the room until his eyes landed on me. My former best friend went rigid. The diaper bag slipped off her shoulder and hit the floor, spilling formula packets across the tile. "My name is Renee. I'm 36 years old, and for 4 years my marriage to Marcus was built on a single accusation that everyone in his family repeated like scripture, that I was broken, that my body had failed at the one job it was supposed to do. Marcus came from old Charleston money, the kind that traces itself back through cotton ledgers and shipping contracts nobody likes to talk about anymore. And his grandmother's estate had a clause in the trust that required a biological heir before any of it transferred to him. Every holiday dinner at that house was a quiet interrogation. His mother would ask, in front of guests, whether I'd looked into anything yet, like infertility was a parking ticket I'd been too lazy to pay. His sister left pamphlets for reproductive specialists tucked into my purse like party favors. Through all of it, my closest friend Holly was the one constant. We'd known each other since our residency programs overlapped at the same hospital system 11 years ago. She sat with me through every appointment, every disappointment, every 2 a.m. phone call where I cried so hard I couldn't finish a sentence. I trusted her with the rawest parts of myself. I had no idea that while she was wiping my tears in one room, she was meeting my husband in another. I found out the way most people find out, by accident badly, and far too late to undo any of it, a misdirected text. A hotel receipt that fell out of his jacket at the dry cleaner. By the time I confronted him, Holly was already 6 weeks pregnant, and Marcus had already hired a divorce attorney, the good kind, the kind that bills 4 figures an hour and knows exactly how to make a no-fault state feel like a punishment. He didn't ask me to leave, he told me to. He stood in our kitchen in Mount Pleasant, the kitchen I'd picked the backsplash for, and said the words that would replay in my head for longer than I want to admit. "I need a woman who can finish what she starts." I left with 2 suitcases and the dignity I had left, which at the time didn't feel like much. What nobody in that family understood, what nobody bothered to ask, was why I never told them the truth. The truth was that I wasn't the one who couldn't conceive. Marcus was. A childhood case of mumps that went untreated longer than it should have, a fact buried in a medical file from when he was 9 years old, long before I ever knew him. He found out 2 years into our marriage, during a routine workup after his cousin's leukemia diagnosis prompted half the family to get full physicals. He came home shaking that day, and I held him on the bathroom floor while he cried about it. I made him a promise, because that's the kind of fool I was back then. I told him I would never tell a soul, that we would just say it was unexplained, that we'd protect his pride because that's what you do when you love someone. I kept that promise for 2 more years, even as his mother humiliated me at her own dining table. Even as Holly held my hand and pretended she didn't already know exactly why I couldn't get pregnant, because by then, she and Marcus already had their own answer to that particular mystery. I didn't fight the divorce. I didn't drag it through court or demand alimony or make a scene. I signed everything quickly, almost too quickly, which I think unsettled Marcus more than a screaming match would have. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had spent the 18 months prior quietly finishing the doctorate in health informatics I'd started before we got married and let lapse for him. I'd been offered a position leading data systems integration for a hospital network expanding across 3 states, the kind of role that doesn't get publicly announced until the ink is dry. I took it. I moved 2 hours away to Savannah, rented a brownstone near the historic district, and threw myself into work, the way some people throw themselves into grief. 18 months later, I was named Executive Director of Clinical Operations for the network's flagship hospital. The same hospital, as it turned out, where Marcus's grandmother had just been admitted for a cardiac procedure, and where his family's name was etched onto a wing they'd funded back when oil money still meant something in this state. I didn't choose this for theater. I want to be honest about that. I took the meeting because it was my job, because the hospital board wanted someone to walk the donor family through the new patient data privacy protocols before the procedure, a courtesy extended to anyone funding an entire cardiac wing. I had no idea Marcus would be sitting in that family lounge when I arrived. I had no idea Holly would be there too, 11 months postpartum. With their son on her hip and a diaper bag full of formula, she'd clearly been bragging about being too good for breast milk to use. But there I was, in the cream blazer I'd bought myself with my first real bonus, holding a cup of chamomile tea because the lounge had a self-serve station, and I needed something to do with my hands. And there he was, the moment he saw me, unable to resist the urge to perform. He always did love an audience. "What is wrong, Renee? Are you scouring the hospital halls trying to find a cure for that empty womb of yours?" He laughed, and a few people near the window turned to look. Holly didn't laugh. Holly had gone very still, watching me with the particular wariness of someone who has spent 11 months building a story and is suddenly unsure if the foundation is as solid as she thought. I didn't raise my voice. I never do. I find that the angrier a man gets, the more people instinctively believe the calm woman in the room. "I'm not here for a cure, Marcus," I said. "I'm here for a meeting with your grandmother's care team. I run clinical operations for this hospital now." The silence that followed had a texture to it. Marcus's mouth opened and nothing came out. Holly shifted the baby higher on her hip like he was a shield. "That's not possible, Marcus," finally, the laugh gone from his voice now. "You worked in claims processing." "I worked in claims processing 7 years ago," I said. "A lot can change when you're not spending your time defending yourself at your mother-in-law's dinner table." That was when Desmond walked in. I should say now that Desmond was not some secret lover I'd been keeping in reserve for a dramatic entrance, because that's not the kind of story this is, and frankly that kind of revenge always struck me as more work than it's worth. Desmond was the network's chief compliance officer, a serious, soft-spoken man in his 50s who I'd worked alongside for the better part of a year, and who happened to be walking through that exact lounge because the cardiac wing shared a floor with administration. He nodded at me on his way past, the way colleagues do, and said, "Renee, the Hale family's paperwork is ready whenever you are." The Hale family, Marcus's family. His grandmother's name was Cordelia Hale, and the wing was the Hale Cardiac Center, and the only reason any of them were sitting in that particular lounge was because I'd had the file open on my tablet 10 minutes earlier. Marcus's face did something complicated. I watched him do the math, watched him realize that the woman he'd told to leave his kitchen with 2 suitcases was now the person whose signature would be required on his grandmother's discharge protocols, the person who'd just walked his family's compliance paperwork through review personally as a professional courtesy nobody had asked her to extend. "You're handling Grandma Cordelia's case," he said, like the words tasted bad. "I'm handling the entire cardiac unit," I said. "Your grandmother happens to be a patient in it." "That's not a coincidence," I engineered, Marcus. "That's just Tuesday." Holly finally spoke, her voice thin. "We should go check on the room." "You should," I agreed and took another sip of my tea. But Marcus wasn't finished. I think some part of him needed to win this moment back, needed to remind himself and everyone within earshot that he had traded up, that he'd made the right call. He gestured at the baby, who had started fuss against Holly's shoulder. "I have a son, Renee. A healthy baby boy. Some women just aren't built for that. And that's fine. I've made my peace with it. I just hope you find peace with it too. I want to tell you I had some perfectly timed, devastating line ready for that moment, the kind you see in movies. I didn't. What I had was 4 years of silence I'd been carrying for a man who never once thanked me for it, and a quiet decision, made right there in that lounge with my tea going lukewarm in my hand, that I was done carrying it. "You should ask Holly," I said, "what the pediatric geneticist told her at the 16-week appointment, the one in Beaufort, the one you weren't at." The fussing baby suddenly seemed very loud in the silence that followed. Holly's face went the color of the tile floor. "What is she talking at?" Marcus said, turning to her, and I watched 4 years of a very expensive, very carefully constructed lie start to come apart in real time, the way ice does when the temperature finally turns, slowly and then all at once. I should explain, because I don't believe in revenge built on lies, and everything I said in that lounge was true. Holly had called me, 6 months into her pregnancy, in a panic I didn't fully understand at the time. She wasn't calling as the woman who'd stolen my husband. She was calling as the only friend she had left who knew anything about genetics, Because I'd spent 2 years of my life researching every fertility specialist and genetic counselor on the eastern seaboard, trying to solve a problem that was never mine to solve. She'd gotten results from a prenatal screening that flagged a marker, something connected to the same childhood illness Marcus never told his family about, the one he'd sworn me to secrecy over. The geneticist had recommended Marcus get tested to confirm whether the marker came from his side. He refused. He told Holly it didn't matter, that the baby was healthy, that there was no reason to go digging through old medical history. What he meant, though neither of them said it out loud, was that there was no reason to risk anyone finding out the truth I'd been protecting for 4 years, out of nothing but loyalty to a man who no longer deserved it. I hadn't told a soul. Not because I owed Marcus anything anymore, but because I genuinely hadn't decided what to do with that information, and some old, stubborn part of me still flinched at the idea of using someone else's medical history as a weapon, even his. But watching him stand there, baby on his ex-best friend's hip, telling me I wasn't built for motherhood, in a hospital where I now had the standing to access exactly the kind of records he was so afraid of, something in me decided the loyalty had run out. Marcus, I said, you've spent 4 years letting everyone in your family believe I was the reason we don't have kids. Your mother prayed over my empty womb at her own dinner table. Your sister left fertility clinic brochures in my coat pockets. I let you have that because I loved you, and because I am apparently a much better person than you deserved. But I am done. The marker the geneticist flagged in Holly's pregnancy traces back to your line, not hers, and definitely not mine. You can get tested today here, with my compliance officer standing right there to witness the consent form, or you can keep lying to your grandmother about why her cardiac surgeon's wing is about to be staffed with people who know your family's actual medical history better than you do. I didn't raise my voice once. I never had to. Marcus didn't get tested that day, he didn't have to. The look on Holly's face was confirmation enough, and within a week, according to people who still talk to me from that world, the baby underwent his own genetic panel, quietly, through a private clinic 2 counties over, the kind of arrangement people make when they're trying very hard not to be seen making it. What I didn't expect was Cordelia Hale. I went to check on her 2 days after the cardiac procedure, purely in my professional capacity, the kind of rounds I made for every major donor family, because it was good practice, and because, despite everything, I still believed in doing my job well, even when it intersected painfully with my personal life. She was sitting up in bed, 81 years old, sharp as anything despite the morphine, and she patted the chair beside her bed without a word of preamble. I heard what happened in that lounge, she said. I told her I hadn't meant to make a scene, that it wasn't my intention to embarrass anyone in front of hospital staff, that I regretted letting my composure slip even for that one sentence. She waved a thin hand at me, the kind of gesture that dismisses an apology before it's finished. I have known for 2 years that something was wrong with the story my grandson told this family, she said. I am old, Renee, not foolish. A woman doesn't carry the shame of an entire family's disappointment for 4 years out of guilt. She carries it out of love for someone who isn't worth it. I knew which one of you that was a long time ago. She told me, in the unhurried way people speak when they suspect they don't have a great deal of time left, that the trust clause requiring a biological heir had been her late husband's doing, not hers, and that she had spent years quietly, trying to get the family attorney to draft an amendment removing it, mostly because she'd never liked watching what it did to the women who married into this family. She said she was amending it now, formally, with the funds redirected not toward whichever grandchild produced an heir first, but toward an endowed fellowship in clinical data ethics at the hospital, named for nobody in particular, because she said she was tired of her family's money being used as a leash. I won't pretend that conversation undid 4 years of dinner table humiliation. It didn't, but it was the first time anyone in that family had looked at me and said, plainly, that they had seen what was actually happening and chosen, for reasons I'll never fully understand, to stay quiet about it anyway. Marcus and Holly are still together, as far as I know, though I hear the foundation under that relationship has gotten considerably less stable since the lounge. I don't keep close tabs. I don't need to. I have a corner office on the 9th floor, with a view of the Savannah River, a job I built with my own 2 hands, while everyone around me was busy deciding what I was worth, based on a lie I was protecting for someone else's comfort, and a standing dinner invitation from Cordelia Hale, who calls me every few weeks now just to talk no agenda, the way I imagine a grandmother might if I'd had one who actually saw me. I poured myself a glass of wine that night, alone in my apartment, and stood at the window looking out over the river the way I used to look out over Marcus's backyard, wondering if I'd ever be enough for anyone. I don't wonder that anymore. I spent 4 years being told my body had failed at the one job that mattered, and it turned out the only thing that had actually failed was my willingness to keep protecting people who never once protected me. I am not broken. I never was. I am simply, finally, no longer carrying weight that was never mine to carry. And there is a particular kind of peace in that I don't think I could have explained to the woman I used to be, sitting at that dinner table, praying for permission to be enough.